Hi everyone, my name is Kaitlyn Collins. I'm a junior and a communication studies major with a minor in journalism. And I would love to talk to you a little bit about my poster that I made for this year's Strike a Spark. And it is titled, Why There is a Lack of Participation Among Students During Group Projects. So this poster was created for Honors 300, which I'm currently in right now. But the research actually took place in a course called Strategic Professional Communication, and it's a class within my major. And that class, I was in it in the fall of 2019. So to give you a little bit of an introduction, during this class, the students created this group project, which we titled Stay Calm. And it was just essentially a group of students who wanted to see changes within the major. So like I said, it was student created, so it was mainly student conducted. So we came to class every day with fresh ideas and kind of collaborated together on what we wanted to see or what we wanted to work on. And in the beginning, there was a lot of participation among students. Everybody was kind of contributing something in some way. And then it began to fall, and essentially it just led to the downfall of this project. So this raised a question to all of us students, but also our professor, Dr. Spicer. Why does there always tend to be a lack of participation during group projects? So because the group project fell, we were each tasked with an individual paper assignment to look into this issue. So I was looking at scholarly articles and lots of resources, and that fueled my research. So there were four main ideals that I looked into, and it was leadership, willingness to communicate, cold calling, and proximity. So first we can talk about leadership. I read an article called Transformational Leadership in the Classroom, Fostering Student Learning, Student Participation, and Teacher Credibility. So in the beginning of this project, most of the students looked to the students who talked the most as leaders. So those students were always expected to talk, expected to lead the discussions, and everybody else just kind of sat back quietly. We also looked to Dr. Spicer as a leader because sometimes he would help to lead our discussions. Now, when he would do this, he would always feel really bad because he kind of wanted to stay out of our project. He wanted us to lead it. But however, I feel like his discussions or what he brought to the table really helped to bring out some new ideas in us students. So this paper that I read said that by using transformational leadership, teachers can positively influence student behaviors and perceptions. And I forgot to say that if you don't know what transformational leadership is, it is basically just a style of leadership that encourages change among a group of people. So when Dr. Spicer would kind of provide us with his opinion, it would bring out new ideas in us, which I thought proved to be very beneficial. The next topic is willingness to communicate. I read an essay that was titled The WTC Scale as a Predictor of Classroom Participation. So WTC just stands for willingness to communicate. A study was conducted in a classroom to measure participation, and it had two hypotheses. And the one was that more students classified as high in willingness to communicate will participate in classroom interaction than will students classified as low in willingness to communicate. The second one is more of the total participation in a classroom will involve students classified as high in willingness to communicate than will involve students classified as low in willingness to communicate. So both of these hypotheses were found to be true. And this information seemed really reflective of what happened in our classroom because the same students were doing all of the talking all the time. So those students seemed to have a high willingness to communicate because they wanted to talk. They would talk without being asked to. They would just throw their ideas out on the table. And some of the other students, some of them never said a word. So they seemed to be low in willingness to communicate. And overall, the students that were high in willingness to communicate did do most of the talking overall throughout the entirety of this project. Next, I want to talk about cold calling. And cold calling is essentially just being randomly called on by your professor. So sometimes, I feel like we've all been there. The students can be a little bit shy in the classroom, or they're afraid of saying the wrong thing and being embarrassed in front of everyone. So they sometimes have really good ideas that they want to share, but they let these feelings kind of hold them back. So sometimes Dr. Spicer would randomly call on students because he'd want to hear people's opinions and ideas. And it seemed like most of the time when he did this, every student that he randomly called on had something really beneficial and just really helpful to say, really useful information. And this wouldn't have been brought up if he hadn't randomly called on them. So a study was conducted where the professor had cold called on students to get them to participate more. And the results of this study was to strongly endorse the practice of cold calling. So it proves to be very beneficial everywhere. And if I didn't say this before, this information came from an article titled Classroom Participation and Discussion Effectiveness, Student-Generated Strategies. The last thing I would like to talk about today is proximity. So proximity can be with virtual work or in-person work. And in this class, we worked on the group project like in class, in the classroom. We sat around in a circle and just had discussions every day. So that was our in-person work. But then it also included virtual work, which required us to participate in a Facebook group where we could share resources and lots of information. And the participation in the classroom was pretty low from the majority of students. Like I said, there were students who did most of the talking all the time, so they were always participating, but the Facebook group showed little to no participation at all. So I read an article called What Do We Know About Proximity and Distance in Work Groups, a Legacy in Research. So physical proximity was found to work better in groups because it allows for more communication. You have the people around you and speaking to you, and students feel more like it's easier to talk when you're in a group of people. But physical separation from other employees in daily life and work drastically reduces the likelihood of voluntary work collaboration. So it just seems that students in the class, some of them would participate in class and then they'd go home and they just wouldn't really want to think about this group project anymore. So it really limited the amount of participation during our virtual work in the Facebook group. So all of these factors had contributed to the downfall of the Stay Calm group project, but it's not just limited to this. These all occur in any group project situation that shows a lack of participation. So just to rephrase, that students want to look at their peers as leaders, and then that makes them feel like, okay, the leaders can do most of the talking. I don't want to interrupt, or I don't have to talk because they're talking. Willingness to communicate plays a big role. So some students just don't have a high willingness to communicate, so they just don't talk. They don't push themselves to speak. And then cold calling can be really beneficial because sometimes students don't want to talk because they're afraid to, or they feel like what they're going to say is wrong. So if they're cold called on, it helps to bring out those new ideas. And finally, students are more likely to participate in discussions in the classroom rather than virtual discussions on any platform. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation today. If you have any questions about my research, please email me. My email is col3634@calu.edu. I would love to talk more about this topic with anyone. So thank you so much.